Hey everyone, I'm Maverick with OwlKnightsMedia, and today we're going to try to wrap up the tutorial series on the Dodge the Creep 2D game made by the Godot folks. So last time we made the main scene, the game's really starting to come together, and today we're going to be working on the heads-up display, or the HUD. Let's go ahead and get started by creating a new scene. And this new scene that they have you make this time is called a canvas layer. Now, a canvas layer you can think of as like a completely separate game scene, and you can layer them and stuff. So everything we've made, if you just picture it on like layer 1, now we have this separate canvas layer outside of that. So we can overlap them, which is effectively what we're going to end up doing. Now, they're going to rename the canvas layer to the HUD. And they have you create a few nodes under it. I believe they make a couple of labels. Control D to duplicate that one. They make a button, and they also make a timer. I'll try to be moving slightly faster this time, one, because there's actually 2 sections to get through, and I want to take no more time than usual, and 2, because a lot of these concepts you guys should now be familiar with. And they rename this label to, the first label to score label, which is odd because the second label, they don't name something label, they just name it message, but oh well. And then this button, they renamed to start button. And the timer, I believe oh, there it is, message timer. Okay, cool. We're moving right along. Now they actually have you override the theme for all 3 of these. I'm going to start with the score label, go to its inspector, and just under the text here, I'm going to put some content. Go to 2D view so we can see what's happening. And we can see that that's what the numbers look like right now. And so one of the first things they have you do is go down into the control section of the inspector, theme overrides, and fonts. And we're going to select by loading this asset that they provided, the font Selenium regular. And that changed the appearance of the text. So pretty cool. We'll snap that shut and open the selection right below it for font size, and they resize that to 64. Now normally I would copy this and paste these settings into these other ones. There's a caveat that I don't really want to get into for this tutorial, and the tutorial certainly doesn't. So we're going to do it the old-fashioned way by going to each of these and changing them appropriately. So for message, I'll just put something here so we can see it. We're going to go to theme overrides, fonts, quick load, and then set the font size to 64 again. One more time for the start button. We're going to go down to control, theme overrides, fonts, select that custom font that they provided, and set the font size to 64 again. Okay. Let's zoom out. I'm going to remove the grid lines. Here we go. Now we can see things a little bit easier, including the outline of the scene. Let's go back to score label, because I think they talk a little bit more about things they want you to do to the score label. Yes. So this score label, they have you click this drop down, which is the anchor presets. Anchor presets are available on control nodes, which you can tell are control nodes because all of them are green. So our score label, our message, our start button, those are all control nodes. Our HUD and our message timer are not control nodes. And I'm highlighting that because the way anchors work, which is a whole topic in and of itself, it's basically position and scaling in relation to a parent. So with that being said, they will use their anchor system based on their parent control node, if there is a parent control node. In this case, there is not. HUD is not a control node. So what it'll do instead, assuming it can, is it will then anchor based on the actual screen or the game scene size itself. So effectively the whole screen. So when I click that score label and I select, say, let's just say full rectangle for science right now, that's where it's snapping to. And you can tell it did because these little green markers are in the 4 corners of the screen. If I were to select, say, center top, you can see those green markers are all pinpointed at the center top of the screen. Now I'm going to put that score label just temporarily under the message node, and I'm going to move the message node to make this more obvious. Now I've highlighted score label again. If you're in selection mode, you can see the greens. And I'm going to do full rectangle, and we can see that it expanded to its parent control node. And I want to highlight that difference in case you guys experience some oddities. That's a good start. It is a system that takes a lot of getting used to. I'm going to put it back where it belongs as a child of HUD, undo my changes by selecting the top center, which is what they want you to do. And so now that is anchored where they want you to anchor it. And then they have this checklist of things to just do. So we're going to just do them. They have you go into the score label text portion of the inspector and set the text to 0, because that's your score at the start of the game. They set in the same area for label horizontal alignment to center and vertical alignment to center. And we're going to do that for each of these, so don't worry about it. Once you've done that, center top. Okay, we already did that. Let's move on to the message. In the message, their number one task is to go to the text area again, and we're going to change that to say dodge the creeps, which is the name of this game. Horizontal alignment center, vertical alignment center. And the next option right below those is word auto wrap, and we're going to set that to word. So if I undo that, you can see it goes off the screen. So wrapping the word allows it to all stay in the screen. And then they set the X, or the size of the component. So let's go ahead and do that. Under Control, Layout, Transform, X. A lot of tunneling, but we got there. And they set it to 480. Now you'll notice that this moves things around, which is probably why they don't anchor until the end. And then they say, okay, for the message label, go ahead and anchor this to, what is it, center? Perfect. And there it is. It's centered on the screen, again, because it doesn't have a parent control node, so it takes the screen instead. Moving along down to the start button. Start is already the text we had in there. Huzzah! All right, under Control, Layout, Transform, same node, of course. We're setting the size of the X, so we're going to set the width to 200, and the height, so the Y, to 100. Gives it a little bit of padding, if you will, for the button. And then they have you snap it down to the bottom of the screen, and then they bump it up so it's not like hugging the exact bottom of the screen. So the way they do that is, again, with these anchor systems, they're going to select bottom center, or center bottom, same thing. It snaps down, which is great, but we don't actually want it touching. So they have you adjust in the same area where you would change the size. They have you adjust the positions Y, right? We're going to bump it up a little bit. So they say set that to 580, and there it goes. It's now a little bit up from the bottom of the screen. I'll press F5 to preview. That'll cause you to save if you haven't saved already. And there's the preview, and that's what the HUD looks like. So we're almost done, but let's keep moving along. Now we get into the code. So they say click on the HUD, create a script. Go ahead and do that. Dun, 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 dun. I'm going to get rid of all the stuff that came baked in, and we're going to add this custom signal, start game. Very similar to the custom, I think it was called hit in the player script. So the signal will act as a flare and will react to it somewhere else. They have you create 3 other functions in this HUD area in HUD Script. The first function they have you create is called show message. I do highly recommend you guys type this stuff out. I'm trying to do it and talk and think at the same time. You guys hopefully can just focus on the tutorial content at your own pace. So I'll explain what this is doing kind of after I type, just so that I don't keep stumbling on my words. So I apologize for the delay here. Message timer, and again, typos are going to be turned into errors if we don't spell everything exactly how it is. So we'll find out when we run the scene. Okay, so this first function, let's go ahead and walk through it real quick. It's called show message, so they're going to pass in a string text to it. And what we're going to do then is then grab that message label and replace whatever is in there. I believe it starts with dodge the creeps, and we're going to replace it with whatever's passed in, which will be something like get ready or whatever the message ends up being. The next line on line 7 is going to show it because that label is going to be set to hide during the regular game. You don't want your HUD displaying at all times. So during the show message, we need to actually show the message, and that's exactly what this does. And for message timer, that's going to start that did we set that to 2 seconds? Oh, I skipped a part. That's going to set the timer, and once the timer's up, we'll react to its timeout signal like we normally do with timers. But let's go ahead and make sure that I set this the way the tutorial has it, which is a wait time of 2 seconds, and it's a one shot. We just need it to run when we specifically tell it to, and not repeatedly thereafter. I believe that's all the changes they make there. All right, so that's how that first function works, and we're going to use that function in this next one. So the next function they have is called show game over. Show game over. And the first thing they do in show game over is invoke the message we just created, our show message function, and you have to pass in an argument. Now this text, if you want to, I don't know if I already said this, you could pass in like types, and that's always a good idea. It's not done in the tutorial, but you can do it if you want. And we're going to pass in game over. I'll remove that for now, just to match the tutorial here. They have a comment, so instead of writing the comment, I'm just going to write the code and explain it here in just a second. Message, oh my goodness, there we go. Message timer, timeout. Now notice I'm not invoking this function. I'm referring to the function. So what this does is await effectively says await for whatever function I list here, not invoke, list. And once that's done, then continue with the next line. Normally what will happen is it would run line 11 as fast as it can, line 12, and then immediately go on to line 13. If this was asynchronous or not with the word await here. Await is kind of exactly what it sounds like in HUD Script, which is really nice. It's just saying, hey, wait for this to happen before you continue with the rest of this function. Now, there are caveats to how that works in relation to other functions, but for now, that's effectively what it does. So once that timeout is detected as done or signaled, we're going to say message.text. So we're going to change the content of the message, just like we were doing with the show message. Message.text equals dodge the creeps. So this is just saying we show them game over, we wait long enough for their shame to set in, and then we set it, instead of saying game over, now it's going to say dodge the creeps. I do find it a little strange that they're kind of mixing and matching things here. Like, you're setting the message text directly in a function where you're also invoking a different function. And since you're awaiting, I don't really know why they don't choose one technique over the other. I'm going to assume there's an asynchronous issue, but it does seem weird to me. And if it seems weird to you, I agree. Leave a comment if you guys know the answer to that one. All right, message.show. Make sure I'm not skipping ahead. Means we just make sure it's showing. Again, I find this very strange because show is also part of this show message that we've already invoked. It just seems strange to me, but it is what it is. They have another await where they're invoking this get tree, which is a built-in function that grabs the overall tree scene or node tree, and then on that we can invoke a built-in function called create timer, which takes in an argument of time. So in this case, 1 second. expressed as a decimal or float. And then specifically that timeout is going to be part of what we're awaiting, very similar to the syntax above. So this one is just slightly different because instead of creating a timer node like we did with the message timer, we're just inlining a temporary, it comes into the universe, plays for a second, throws its timeout, and then it goes out of the universe. It's gone. So this is much more ephemeral in nature, and sometimes you want that for a short delay. Anyway, at the end of this function, they reference the start button that we made, and they're going to make it show. Because the game over has happened. We've lost the game. We got told, hey, you lost the game, but now they want us to have the opportunity to continue playing. So that's why that start button is set to show. It's why we changed the message again to dodge the creeps. Okay. So it'll make much more sense once we test it, but let's get there. We haven't connected the button yet, so can't really test it yet. Let's make that third function update score. And this does exactly what it sounds like, where we're going to pass in whatever score we want to be updated to, and we're going to make that display in the label for the score. So score label dot text is going to be set to that score. Now it's not just the score, because the score is probably going to be passed in as an integer. So what they're doing here is, instead of typing everything, they're just forcing this to be a string by using this convenience built-in method called str, which is short for string, and it does its best to convert whatever you pass to it to be a string. And you can always reference that in the docs, str. And there it is, converts one or more arguments to a type string in the best way possible, computer science stuff, whatever. Okay. Now they talk about actually hooking things up, which we're getting real close to being able to test this and see it all work, so that's exciting. Connect the press signal of the start button and the timeout signal of the message timer to the HUD node. All right. So start button and message timer. So I'll hit start button, go to the node, signals, pressed, double click that, select HUD, connect that. Message timer, I'm going to do the same thing except with the timeout signal. All right, so we got those at the bottom here. We're going to replace the content for the button press. We're going to hide it, because if they hit start, then we don't want that button to just stay there. So they hit start, that's all we needed to know, make the button go away because we're about to play the game. And this here, start game, is that signal that we wrote at the top of the file. So we're going to emit it, which is a hint that we're going to end up connecting to the main scene and the main game and the main script. So that's what that signal is going to be used for. But we'll get there. All right. Next up, we have this on message timer timeout, which is just saying once that timer's done, hide the message. So it's kind of like in a racing game where you say 3, 2, 1, go. If go stayed up the whole race, it'd be really annoying, right? It needs to go away. And so that's what this is going to do. This message is going to hide. And we saw earlier in the code up there, sorry, I don't like a lot of extra space, that the message will be invoked to show at several different areas. Okay. It then talks about connecting HUD to main. I'm going to try to test this scene first just to make sure we have no errors or typos or whatever. So I'll press F6. Looks good. I'm going to hit start, and what I expect to happen, since we're not connected to the main scene yet, I still expect the button to disappear and the dodge the creeps message to update. So the dodge the creeps message didn't update, but I could also be confusing other things I've done in prep for the tutorial. But this is relatively what we're expecting. Let me just double check. When we press the start button, we hide it, and we emit start the game. Okay, so that's correct. Everything's fine. I was jumping ahead mentally. Cool. So with that test out of the way, let's move on to the fun part, making it all go together. So I'm going to go ahead and select the main scene, and we're going to instantiate the HUD onto that main scene as a child. There's a couple of different ways to do that. Since this is available to me in this little file area, I'm going to just drag and drop that onto the main, and boom, it's now a child. Now, just because it's a child doesn't actually mean it's connected, but you can see it if you, let's turn those lines off. You can see it, and we can see all the other things back when we were working on the main scene, so that's a good step. Now we need to actually connect these things. So if we select HUD and go to the signals for the start game, let's go ahead and connect that to the main. Now they change it up a little bit, and instead of creating a new function, they actually want you to connect it to an existent function from what I recall. Yes, connect the HUD start game signal to the new game function. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the node that has the function we want to connect to. So left click that, and then we're going to hit this pick icon, and that allows us to literally pick or choose which function in that node or script we want to reference. So they said new game. We'll go ahead and click OK. Connect, and that new game will get that green symbol, and so now we're connected officially. I'll go ahead and save that. Now, just because we're connected doesn't mean that the main scene is going to do anything, right? So we still need to add some code to react to that connection in the signal firing. And that's exactly what they do in the next part of the tutorial. So under new game, now we're going to be able to reference HUD, now that one, it exists, and two, since it's been instantiated as a child of main, we know that it's going to be in scope, so we can do this $ thing. And we're going to invoke several of the functions that we just wrote. So update score, and we're going to pass in the score, which is in scope already here. So new game, score is going to be set to 0, and we pass that into the update score, and that updates the label in the HUD scene to then say 0. They also have us do show message for the new game. So referencing HUD, it's a lot of back and forth. That's why I think it's really important to do a lot of testing. So go at the pace that makes you comfortable. Show message, get ready. I'm going to add an exclamation. No, well, fine. We'll do it the way they do it. So when the new game function fires, basically when they press the start button, a signal will go out. The main script will detect it as part of its new game function, and it will fire, and it will also update the score to be 0 so that you start a new game with no points, and show the message get ready, which will only show temporarily because the message timeout will trigger and then hide the message. All right, we'll see it all come together here shortly, but I want to make sure that we follow these instructions carefully. Next up, in the game over function, we're also going to reference the HUD, and we're going to invoke the show game over function that we wrote, and we walk through how that works. And then finally, they have us go to, I'm going to search for it, Control F in whatever file, on score timer timeout. All right, there's only one result. That's definitely it. So when that happens, we also want to invoke the HUD's show update the score. Update score. Now, hopefully I didn't make any typos because then we'll get errors, but I think that's everything we needed to do. They have a warning in the tutorial where they say, if you pass anything into the ready function, be sure to revert that so that you don't have overlap here. But assuming that you've been following along with either my videos or the tutorial, you should be good on that front. Let's go ahead and press F5, which will run the scene, or run the game. Okay, looks good. When I hit start, I expect the button to disappear, the message to change to get ready, and then 2 seconds later, the message to go away. The score will then start ticking up, and the enemies will start spawning. So let's see what happens. All right, we can move, so that's cool. And the score is going up, the enemies are spawning. I'm gonna hopefully get a really slow enemy to appear so I can talk about the next section, but I won't wait too long for that to happen. And that's a couple more seconds, come on, something slow. Oh my goodness. Game's really addictive, so this is cool. You guys get to actually see it playing out. I'm just going to let this game over here. Now I'm going to press start, and you'll notice that the game started, but an enemy was still on the screen. So the very next section on here is fixing that. So that if you hit start, you don't have enemies on the scene already, right? Because they could kill you on accident before you, and it's really not fair. All right, let's see what they say about that. And the way they do this is by creating a group for the enemy that we can then reference in the code much more dynamically, as opposed to trying to like get the node and figure out exactly where it is. So that's easier shown than explained. So let's go ahead and do it. So in the File Explorer, I'm going to select the mob scene. Here it is. Select the mob node. And then over in the inspector under node, instead of showing signals, I want to see groups, which I haven't made any. So let's go ahead and click this plus sign. And we're going to assign that to groups. Whatever you name it, that's the group, right? So we'll hit OK. And now we can see that there's this scene group for mobs. So every mob that gets instantiated is going to be part of that group. And we can take advantage of that in the code. So hopping back into the new game function in the main script. So let's search new game. There it is. New line there. Now we're going to do this get tree, which again gets the scene tree of the game. Call groups, which is the built-in function. And the way call groups works is you specify as the first argument the group or the groups. Group. Singular. Typos. The bane of all coders. Call group will take in an argument of the group that you want to do something. And so the next argument, the second argument, is what do you want them to do? So we're going to call group mobs, which we just made that group. And then the second argument is we're going to invoke the built-in method that's on most Node2Ds, most nodes, I'm pretty sure. It's available widely, which is queue-free. Q-U-E-U-E free. All right. And so what this is going to do is when you hit start game, we're going to say every mob, delete yourselves from this universe. And let's go ahead and try to test that out. I'll try to get a quick game over and hopefully we can see this happen. And these are pretty slow. As soon as I hit click start, they left the scene. I gotta make them slower. Let's try to get lucky, basically. Problem with tutorials. All right, this should work. I'm gonna hit start. Boom, they disappeared. And that's exactly what we expected to happen. So perfect, it's working. Okay, granted, you could have also like tried it yourself, but I, as a presenter of a video, right, I'm obligated to demonstrate. Okay, call group function, da 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 da. Okay, so that looks like the end of the tutorial. It's actually not. Let me just check our time. If we're just a bit under where we normally are, I'm going to try to wrap up with their extra section where they add a background and some noises and stuff. So let's see where we're at. Pardon me for a second. I've got a few minutes before I'm at the cap where we normally end. So let's try to crank both of these lessons out. The second part to this, finishing up, should be a lot faster. I'm going to do my best to go quickly. If you stopped here, you would have a functioning game, so good job on that. Let's finish up with final touches. Okay, so they have you go into the main scene and create, I believe it's a color rectangle, color rect, which is a control node. We talked about those earlier. And I think they have you add it right underneath main. Let's go to 2D view. And we're going to use those anchors again to get the full size. Maybe it needs to be last, but we'll get there. And we're going to then click that, go to the inspector. That color can be any color you so choose. I like clicking this button here to change it so I can see colors. I'm going to choose pinkish, purplish. That's fine. Whatever color suits your fancy. This is not that important. And what else do they do? Let's see. I think that'll actually just work. That's really harsh on the eyes, so like choose a color that isn't. But that's how that works. You can quickly do that. sound effects is fairly straightforward as well. So we're going to add 2 audio stream players to this main. So audio stream player. I'll just Control D to duplicate that one. And they rename, I think, one of these to music. And let's see, what's the other one? Death sound, which is exactly what it sounds like. They'll end up coding that to happen when you game over. So click on the music node. Here's this stream property. So I'm actually going to go into their assets here. I think they shoveled it under art, or I did, or something weird, but either way, it's in the assets area. So house in a forest loop, I'm just going to drag that over there. And we're going to click this to open up more options. Now to make it loop, we actually have to make it unique. So if you click this drop down, you can make that unique, and then we can check that loop, which will make it constantly play. And let's go to death sound, add in the game over wave. That one we don't want to loop, right? That would be obnoxious. And okay, so we have these two sounds. We need to make them happen. So let's go back into the main script, and under new game, we're going to invoke the reference to that music node or that sound node, and we're going to press play. And then the opposite of a new game would be game over, right? So we go into the game over, so right above it, silly me. In the game over, we also reference music because it's playing, right? So we want it to stop playing, which is of course a built-in function. So, you know, the music is kind of similar to timer where you have a start built in, except music has stop as well. I don't know if timers do, so whoops on me, I should have Googled that first, but I didn't. And then let's get this death sound and play that death sound. Now, death sound isn't set up to loop, so it should just play once. Let's run the game. Hopefully you guys can hear the music coming from my monitor, but it's fairly loud. If you can't, I apologize. I'm not going to stop my recording just to make sure, but it's definitely playing. I also heard when we died this like doot-doot-doot noise. I really hope that's coming through my monitors, but either way, it is functioning and hopefully is working for you as well. Go ahead and close that screen, and that's most of the game. Let's see, they have a ready. Okay, so the last thing they do is they add a keyboard shortcut. Let's show you guys how to do that. So go to project settings, input map, I think. Yeah, and we're gonna create a new action, and that action's, we're gonna, I don't know, call it start game. Doesn't really matter. Just add that action and then click the plus sign next to it to have whatever button you want to map. I'm going to press enter, then press OK with my mouse. And so now enter is part of this start game action. We can close that out. And in the button, so we're going to go to the HUD scene where that start button lives. I'll go to 2D to make this a little more obvious. And in the node inspector for that start button, there's actually a shortcut, little drop down. So button, base button, right above control. Here's shortcut. We're gonna select this, hit a new shortcut, click the shortcut. It's a lot of like nested things. And that takes in an array because you could have more than one. I'll hit add element, and then I'm going to select the drop down for that individual thing. And we're gonna select new input event action, which is the thing we just made. Let me expand this a bit so you guys can see. This is the end of the tutorial, so I'm going to actually just close the tutorial over here and expand for you guys. There's my desktop. All right, here, this should be a lot easier to see. We're gonna click that, and we're gonna just type in the name of the action, which we named start game. If you forgot for whatever reason, you can go back into project settings. We're gonna press F5 to run the game. Now this time, I'm gonna click enter instead of clicking my mouse, and the shortcut worked. The game works. Move around, get game overed, try to beat your score. That's Dodge the Creeps. Thank you all for sticking it out through to the end. I appreciate it. Again, my name's Maverick with OwlKnightsMedia. Stay tuned.